I think of the use of drugs, or the lack actually of the use of psychoactive substances, as having a great opportunity cost. Um, my my thought on that came from an experience about 10 years ago or so when I was a volunteer with a hospice in Southern California. I volunteered to work with a hospice and be with dying people, not, I must confess, out of a lot of generosity, but because I suspect that I'm going to die sometime, and I wanted to find out how it's done. I mean, what the best way would be. So I volunteered with the hospice, and I remember that one of the people that was assigned to me was Fred. He was a 68-year-old air conditioning contractor, lived in a kind of middle-class suburb of Los Angeles. And he was dying of colon cancer, and I would sit for hours with him while his wife went away and did shopping and so forth. And one evening, his wife called me and said, Fred's out of control, and can you come over right away? And I said, yes, I would. And I couldn't imagine, how can he be out of control? He's in bed, he's very sick. I have to help him to the bathroom. How is he going to be out of control? It took me 10 minutes to drive over. I remember driving into their driveway, and his wife Helen was standing with the screen door open. Their 12-year-old daughter was there, and they're waiting for me to rescue them from this situation of Fred being out of control. And I remember saying to myself, oh boy, I don't have any particular skills in this. This is where the rubber hits the road. I went in there, I looked in the bedroom, he's not in the bed. I look in the bathroom, door's open, he's not there. I look in the kitchen where they tried to feed him, he's not there. He's in the living room. Watching television. I walk in, and he throws up his sort of bony hands, skin, yellowish that you could see through, and he says, Bob, come in and watch television. And so I sat down with him, and he explained how he could look at the images on the television, and it was as if there was a deck of cards, and you could see the life history of all the people in the television. They were three-dimensional. And sometimes entities, he said, came into the room, and he would have a conversation with the entity, and he would nod his head and say yes. I was sitting next to him, and I would listen, and I was very curious with this. And I remember one time when I said, he had a sentence, and he said something, and I said, what did you say? And he turned to look at me with feigned anger and said, don't you know it's impolite not to interrupt a conversation? And then he laughed because he thought, here I'm fancy degrees, can't see the entities. He had been given Bromston's mixture, which is a combination from Bromston's Hospital in London, which includes the morphine and alcohol, sometimes cocaine, rarely, but food coloring and so forth. His oncologist had prescribed that to him. And he was out of control simply because he didn't want to go to bed and die according to our plan. The next day, I go in and I see him. He's back to his dull, sleepy, uremic self, lying in bed. I walk into the room. He says, hello. I pull up a chair because I'm really curious about this. And I say, do you remember last night? And he says, yeah. And I said, what do you think about it? And he says, it was good. And I say, you really liked it? And he says, oh yeah, it was fabulous. Why didn't somebody tell me about this before? I'm too sick to do it now. And then it got silent, and he was almost tearful and either too tired or too embarrassed. And a long silence, and then he said, why didn't somebody tell me about this before? Mm-hmm. And I just sort of took his bony hand and held it in mine, because I didn't have a good answer.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by an opportunity cost. The opportunities were no longer available for him. And I remember leaving that house on a sunny afternoon, getting into the warm cocoon of my Volvo and driving home, and I'm out of that house of death and bad smells. And I had the idea that there ought to be an amendment to the preamble of the Constitution of the United States that would say something such as, no citizen shall be deprived of the right to experience the full range of human consciousness. It's an opportunity. It's a birthright. It doesn't mean we have to do it. In fact, I'm a coward, and I tend to be too scared to do a lot of this. But there should be a safe and effective way in which we can design the opportunities for citizens to experience what the rare opportunities we have in consciousness are. And that's what I mean by opportunity costs, that so much of our policy now it costs us because we don't have the opportunity and the possibility of exploring what I think we could explore if we wanted.